Well, good morning, everybody. Welcome to this week's webinar entitled Effective Communication Skills. We got a lot to get through today, so I'm not going to dilly-dally at all, but just a quick introduction to myself. If you don't know who I am, my name is Andy Goldberg. My company is Action Coach. We're a franchise. There's about 1,400 of us based around the world, coaching businesses to grow and get better. And these days, we're certainly doing a lot of help with businesses to get them through COVID-19 and make sure that we don't just survive, but we thrive coming out of this. And the reason I chose this topic for today was there's a lot of webinars going around about the coronavirus, and that's really important. I mean, businesses need to know what to do. We've got to be taking massive action to survive this. But I just thought, well, wait a minute, it's also business as usual. There's a lot of things we need to be doing during COVID-19 that we should be doing anyway, and we need to be getting better anyway. And we are, in fact, on the brink of coming out of this. And we need to get back on track and really get back on the disciplines and behaviors that make for good business leaders, good salespeople, basically just good workers in the workforce. And I thought nothing's more important than good communication. In fact, I'll share why I think there's nothing more important. But communication is vitally important with our teams, with our customers, during lockdown and when we come out of lockdown. So this webinar probably takes somewhere around 30 to 45 minutes, and hopefully we'll allow time for questions. And I have deleted a bunch of slides here to make plenty of time for that. So we may need to do a second webinar to follow up. And hopefully this is being recorded and it'll be up on my YouTube channel later today. And you'll be able to watch it again and again and again, but I would encourage you to take notes. Also, I'll put my contact details up at the end if you want to find out more about what we've discussed today, or if you just want to find out more about business coaching and how it could help you move your business forward. So, welcome to Effective Communication. There's two things mainly we're going to discuss today. One is a summary of how DISC profiling works. I know that sounds a little bit ominous, but DISC profiling is just it's just kind of a broken down version of NLP, Neuro Linguistic Programming. Very, very effective for leaders, managers, and salespeople. And also a bit around assertiveness, which I think is really important. So I want to share with you a phrase I learned a long time ago in Action Coach training, 10 years ago actually, which has had a huge impact on my life. And I want to start with this, and it goes like this. The only true measure of communication is the response that you get. And what that really means is if you wanted to assess or measure the quality of how you communicate, are you a good communicator? There's really only one way to assess the quality of your communication, and that's to look at, did you get the response you were after? So you can't really control how another person responds to what you say to them. All you can really control is the effectiveness of how you communicated, and you'll get the response back that you get. And the better the response you get, or the more accurate the response you get, or you get the response you want, that is all the result of how well you actually communicated to them. So I guess what I'm saying is you need to take ownership. You need to take responsibility for your communication. There's no use blaming the other person. Oh, this person doesn't understand, or this person's not a good listener, or this person isn't interested in what I have to say. No, it's all down to you, because it's got to be down to you. There's no other way to do it. You can't change the way somebody else listens. You can only change the way you communicate. So why is communication so important? Why do we need to be doing webinars on this and training and reading books? Well, I'm just going to throw a few statistics at you. And 78% of statistics are made up. We all know this, but take it as you will. But these are all very relevant in business today, particularly if we are going to start going to virtual and people are going to be working more remotely. 70% of the reasons why customers are lost is directly related to inadequate communication. So if we're not communicating well enough with our customers and with our prospects on an ongoing basis, And it's not just about frequency, but it's about quality of communication. So we need to be adding value to our customers' lives, to our customers' businesses all of the time. 95% of professionals regard the relationship with their boss as the key factor in their decision to stay or leave their job. So, you know, it's a really, really important aspect. If you're losing people, if people are leaving your business and going to the competition, 95% of the time that might be down to, you know, how they view you as their manager or as their employer. 70% of all change initiatives fail due to insufficient focus on people. So we want to implement change in the business, but so we might be doing the mechanics and launching the systems, but are we really focusing on how we're communicating to our team, what we're doing, why we're doing it, why it's important, why each person's individual role is important. 85% of success comes from a person's interpersonal skills, and only 15% is due to technical competence. Again, really, really important when we teach our recruitment strategies. We teach people to really focus on how is somebody's, you know, communication, what are their behaviors, what's their personality like. You can teach them the technical skills, but you can't change somebody's personality, or, you know, that will take a really, really long time, and arguably it's not even your responsibility to do. 50% of time is wasted in business due to lack of trust. You know, we don't trust our people to do the job right, so we end up micromanaging us, or we end up micromanaging them, or our team don't trust us when we ask them to do something, so we're not getting the best performance, and we don't have a great culture in the organization. And 60% of how employees perceive their workplace climate or their culture or their environment can be traced to the actions of one person, the leader. The leader creates the culture in the organization. They are the starting point, and they're the only really common denominator in an organization, is it always comes back to the leader. So if you're looking at your team and you're seeing gossip, you're seeing negativity, you're seeing arguing, or you're seeing ineffective communication, ultimately that's going to be down to you to take ownership of that, take responsibility for that, and change it for the better. All right, so let's get straight into DISC. DISC is it's a type of neuro-linguistic programming, or NLP. If you've never heard of NLP, it's really, really good training. You can get certified, and it costs thousands of dollars to get certified in NLP, and takes weeks and weeks and weeks. I'm going to teach it to you in about 20 minutes. It basically boils down to what we call matching and mirroring. Not mimicking another person, but basically communicating with another individual the way they prefer to communicate. So it's basically, it's taking the golden rule and turning it into what we call the platinum rule. So the golden rule, if you ever read the Bible, the golden rule says, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. And unfortunately, I think that they got that wrong. And the platinum rule is slightly different. Do unto others the way they would have done unto them. Because the way, the things you want done to you might be different than the way somebody else wants things done to them. And in communication, what that means is the way you prefer to communicate is probably different than the way the other person prefers to communicate. So if you do unto the other person the way you would have done unto you, you're not being fair. You're basically just living out your preferences rather than taking into consideration that the other person might communicate differently. So we're not really about mimicking another person, but we just kind of want to adapt our communication style slightly to the communication style of the other person. So DISC is designed to help you not just understand the behavior and communication style of the other person, but you first need to understand how you actually do it. So let's just take a quick look at how DISC works. There's basically two styles of people. First and foremost, task-orientated or people-orientated. And what that means is task-orientated people are people who are really focused on the job, focused on the task, focused on the actions at work. And people-orientated people are people that are more interested in the people and relationships and communication and that kind of thing. And then we have people who are either outgoing or reserved. And hopefully you understand what these two terms are. Outgoing, outspoken, louder, more dynamic. Reserved, probably quieter, maybe shyer, that kind of thing. So you'll have 4 different categories of people. And the first is what we call D. So D from DISC. And these are task-orientated, outgoing people. I's are outgoing people. S's are still people, but they're more reserved. And the C's, so this spells DISC obviously, C's are task-orientated and reserved. Now, people are complicated, and there's no point in trying to box somebody into one of these, but everybody tends to have one most prominent letter associated with their style, but there'll be a mixture of the others. And there will also be, and it's also situational. So depending on the situation you're in, you might be one or the other. But we tend to display one characteristic more than the other. So let's take a look at what these characteristics actually mean. Let's start with the D's. So D stands for dominance, outgoing, task-orientated people. These people are the decision makers. They often drive things. They're great starters, but maybe not so great on the finishing. But you know, they shout and scream a lot. They get people to do the work. They make decisions quickly. You know, they're very demanding. Leaders are very often high Ds. Entrepreneurs very often high Ds. They like to see a lot of activity, but maybe they're getting other people to do the work. Again, we're going to go into more detail with each of these categories in a minute. I stands for influencers. So these are the people. They love to be around people. They're very interesting and interested in other people, really interactive, love to be around people. And they use their, you know, inspirational qualities to win people on board. C's are task-orientated and reserved. I happen to be a high C. C's are very detail-orientated, very careful, very cautious. They want to make sure everything's right. They want to make sure everything's, you know, lined up. They think a lot about stuff and pretty deep. And the S's are people, but they're reserved. So the quieter people. The main characteristic of the reserved is they're very sensitive. So they've got a high emotional intelligence. They tend to be very understanding, but they might come across as quite shy. So there's no right or wrong DISC profile. We are what we are, and that's what makes the world go round. There's no right or wrong. There's no bad or good, but there are strengths and weaknesses to each. So the D, their strength is, you know, powerful. They get people to do stuff. They make decisions. They're driving and demanding and dynamic. But their weakness might be that the D can sometimes forget that they're dealing with people because they're so task-orientated. They just want things to get done. They just want to get results. And they can come across sometimes as, you know, obnoxious or uncaring. They don't always, it's not that they're not caring, it's just that they would rather just get the job done, and they don't always take into account somebody's feelings. The I's, popularity, big party, you know, everybody look at me, you know, let me surround myself with lots of people. Instead of having a meeting in a meeting room, let's go off to the pub. The weakness, perhaps, of the I is that they're not all that good at sticking to plans. They may not be all that detail-orientated. They might not be all that organized. So they might be late to something, or they might stay too long for something, and they might go off track and lose focus. The S's, peace and stability is the strength of the S. Okay, there tends to be calm and a lack of conflict when the S is around, and so their weakness is the S doesn't like conflict. So the S may not respond the way you want them to respond in situations of unexpected change or conflict. And the C's, well, their strength is perfection. I like to joke that the world would be a better place if there were more C's. We like things in their place. We like to be organized. We like to be tidy. We spell check everything before we send it out. We make sure all our bullet points are lined up correctly. So that's the strength of the C, but the challenge with the C is that they don't necessarily go at the pace that you want them to go. They take too long. They take too long to make decisions. They take too long to finish the work because they want to make sure everything's right. They want to make sure they have all of the facts, all of the information before making a decision. They can go so slowly, they can drive people, especially the Ds, they can drive people crazy. Okay. So let's go look at these in a little bit more detail. Okay, so first the Ds. Now, if you've got a very high DISC profile in one of these letters, we call you a high D. So the high Ds are risk takers. Okay, so they'll try anything. So if you went to a pool party, the D would just jump right into the pool. They're not going to check the temperature. They don't care. They don't even care if the pool is deep enough. They're just going to jump in and hope for the best. So, you know, they move quickly. They make decisions quickly. They're very daring, very bold. They love to solve problems. They're self-starters, so they're self-motivated. You don't need to push or kick a D into action. They're just going to go and do it. And they demand, you know, results from other people. They demand performance from other people. So they can be very demanding and very driving. So the value that they bring to an organization is they love a challenge. They start stuff. They get stuff started. They're always thinking of new ideas. You know, Ds can get bored pretty quickly. So if you want somebody that's always thinking about the next thing, always driving change, Ds are great for that. So the environment for a D, if you're hiring, so DISC profile is a great recruitment tool. If you're hiring somebody who's going to be in an environment where they have a lot of freedom, you don't want to have to look after them very often. They can make their own decisions, set their own schedules, drive their own initiatives. A D would be great for that. So you want to make sure if you do hire a D that they're not in a role that is tedious, boring, the same, routine, because they'll get bored very quickly and they'll leave. Ds need to constantly be getting new challenges, new opportunities, and plenty of freedom to do their own thing. Some of the limitations of the D, some of the things you need to look out for with the D is that because they're so bold and they're so daring, they'll just keep taking on more work. And you can end up overloading a D because Ds are still human. They just sometimes think they're not human. They think they're superhuman. The other thing you need to look out for with the D is because they're so task orientated, I talked about this earlier, is that their communication style may be a little bit, what's the word, blunt. And so they may lack diplomacy and tact. So sometimes the D needs to be, you know, a little bit more sensitive to other people. These are the ones who forget about DISC profile, right? So they're the ones that forget to give a little bit of love to the high Is and the high S's when they're communicating with them. In situations of higher stress and higher pressure, the Ds can just come off as really aggressive and demanding or even egotistical, because the Ds are just like, come on guys, what's the matter with everybody? Let's just get going here. And they can come across as angry. Doesn't mean that they are. This is just a communication style, right? It's a behavioral profile. The Is, the people, they're just so optimistic and positive and enthusiastic and sociable and love to laugh and just need to be around people. And they're often very charming and, you know, just really comfortable around people. And they love people and they're very trusting. And people tend to trust them and they're usually very likable. So that's what they bring to a business in terms of value is enthusiasm and popularity and, you know, really, really good at motivating other people. So, you know, the Is need to be in a team environment. Do not hire a high I into a role that doesn't involve a lot of communication or contact with other people. They also need to have some freedom to do their own thing, although you need to keep an eye on the I because they don't really stick to plan all that well. And Is want everybody's opinion. They want everybody to be involved in a decision. Okay? So don't leave the Is in a place where they're going to be alone for long periods of time. The limitations of the I, not detail orientated. If you want something done perfect, don't give it to an I. Not because an I isn't clever, and not because an I doesn't care. It's just that an I doesn't stay that focused on the detail. They're more of the, you know, they're the social aspect, not the detail. And Is are situational listeners, and what that means is they don't stay focused for very long. So you're going to see conversations keep going off on tangents with the I. And high levels of stress, they can become very talkative. If an I becomes too talkative or gabby or just starting to go all over the place, or talking fast, maybe you need to ask them if there's something wrong. And they can come across as even just overly optimistic and unrealistic about some things. The S's, now I have no S in my disc profile at all, but I love an S. It's one of my favorite disc profiles. In fact, my wife and many members of my family are very high S's. So I love an S. I really admire an S, but I'm about as far from an S as you can get. So some of the descriptions of an S, they're very understanding, very sensitive. They can read a room. They can read a mood. So an S can tell if something's bothering you, even if you're trying to do your very best not to show it. S's are very friendly, but they probably come across as a little bit shy, so they're really, really good listeners. And very stable and very kind of just sincere, but they'll make really good eye contact. They're very patient. So what they bring to a team is, S's really want to please. S's would hate to be disciplined or be told that they got something wrong. So they tend to be very dependable and they'll do their very, very best. And S is a workhorse. So they'll do whatever is necessary to make sure that you get what you were looking for. So they work really, really well under leadership. They're very patient and understanding. They do take time. They're really good thinkers. So they're probably good service, probably good problem solvers, and they'll be really good at customer service. So in terms of repeat business, relationships with customers, an S is ideal. So an environment that you would want to put an S in is an environment that deals with people again, but keeps people calm. You don't want to put an S in an area where there's a lot of conflict or a lot of unexpected change. An S likes a little bit of stability. S's are good at doing the same job over and over and over again. Don't put an S in an environment where everything changes all the time. And an S likes predictability. They like to know what they're getting into. Some of the limitations of the S is that they'll give in to conflict. We're going to talk a little bit about passive behavior later on. S's can tend to come across as very passive, which is not a good thing. We think it's a good thing having somebody who's going to say yes to everything we tell them to do. But personally, I want people that are going to challenge me on my own thinking and or come up with better ideas than the one I had. S's don't like a lot of change, and they can be troubled by certain situations that they didn't expect, and they can be troubled by conflict. In high situations of stress for the S is that they will clam up, so they will say nothing when they're feeling stress or pressure or having a problem. They'll say very little, and then one day they'll just explode. So you got to be really careful with an S. So S's need a lot of communication. They need a lot of love, a lot of listening and understanding. That's why when you pair a D with an S, the D will just stress the hell out of the S. And the S will just frustrate the D. So yeah, non-emotional is the S. They'll just clam up and go quiet if they have a problem. So that's when you want to kind of talk to them and just really give them some attention. Finally, the C's, detail-orientated, careful, cautious, and precise. They take their time, they're analytical. And so that's what they bring to the team is perfection. Very, very high standards. If you want something done right, give it to a C. If you want something done fast, don't give it to a C, okay? They're great problem solvers. They love to try and fix things. Bring your problems to the C. They won't stop until it's done. They're like the Terminator. They just keep going and going and going until they solve a problem or they fix something. They need to be in an environment where they're not distracted very often, okay? So C's get annoyed and they lose their focus if people keep coming up to them with questions or problems. You'll often see a C might come across as a little bit aloof, and because they got their head down, they're working on something. Don't talk to me. I'm busy working at the moment. I need to concentrate. C's need concentration. So put them in an environment where they're not going to be bothered too often. Give them plenty of technical work and things that they can think about and really get stuck into. Some of the limitations of the C, though, is that, like I said, they can come across as aloof. They're not necessarily people, okay? So they might even struggle with things like eye contact, or they might even look like they're not really listening to you. And it might be the case because they might be thinking about other things, because they can become quite obsessive with things that they're working on at the moment or the problems that they're facing. And they get bogged down in the details. So again, C's might drive the D's crazy because the D just wants things done quickly, quickly, quickly. And the C's like, no, we need to think about this. We need to think about that. So they can often come across as almost like they're pessimistic. And they're often criticized for being pessimistic when all they're really doing is, when you've got a C like in a meeting, the C's going to be the one who keeps coming up with the problems. And you're like, stop coming up with problems. We're trying to come up with solutions here. But all the C is doing is just making sure that we're risk-free. You know, the C just wants to make sure everything goes right. And for better or for worse, that's kind of their description. So when you're dealing, so can you see, first of all, how, by the way, just type any questions in the question box if you have any as we go along. We'll either answer them as we go along or we'll leave them to the end. But can you see how DISC profile can help you, first of all, in recruitment? So I would certainly recommend that you DISC candidates before you hire them, because you want to make sure that they fit the positional contract of that role. So you need to look at the environment, look at their responsibilities, look at the person you're trying to find. And then when you start interviewing, you can get them to complete a DISC assessment, and you can read that DISC assessment and you can see, well, this person fits the profile. Same with sales. You want to understand the DISC profiles of your customers so that you can communicate with them in an ideal format. Because you want to consider, well, you know, C's want a lot of detail. C's need all the information before they can make a decision. So if you're selling to a C, you need to make sure you give them enough enough information to make a decision. Otherwise, you're going to get the objection, I need to think about it. If you're selling to a high D, the last thing they want is all the detail. They don't have the time. They don't have, they're impatient. Just give them the high level information. Is this going to do what I need it to do? And how much does it cost? And then the D will make a decision. If you're selling to a high I, you want to become their best friend. Get them laughing, get them chatting, take them out to lunch. That's the best way to sell to a high I. And with a high S, they, you know, they worry about conflict. They worry about problems. You want to build trust with an S. So you need to show that you're a good listener and really patient with, you know, and the S will grow over time to trust you and like you. So, and the same goes with managing employees. You know, if you're managing a C and you give them a project, you got to give them a lot of information. The C is going to keep coming back to you, asking questions. When do you want it done by? Who else is going to be on the project? What format do you want this thing delivered in? But if you gave all that information to a D and said, hey, D, can you go ahead and do this project? The D's going to be like, yeah, I'll do it. Don't stop giving me all the detail. If I have a question, I'll come and ask you. Just let me get on with it. Leave me alone. And with the I, if you were managing a high I on your team and you gave them a project, you probably want to say to the high I, first of all, hey, how was your weekend? Or you want to ask them about their kids, or tell them a joke. But you know, you want to pal around a little bit and chat with the I before you just start getting down to business. Otherwise, you know, you're not going to be getting the most out of them. So different behaviors for each of these different styles. But I also understand that you can't run a DISC assessment. By the way, a DISC assessment is a survey. It's a questionnaire that you can complete, and it'll run your DISC report and give you a detailed explanation of your own DISC profile. I can do those for you. We work with a company, an action coach that does DISC profiles. There is a cost associated with it. It's £20.95 plus VAT per DISC profile. Very, very worthwhile to do that, first for yourself and then for every member of your team. So if you're interested in doing DISC assessments for you or your team, just email me at andrewgoldberg@actioncoach.com and we can get those assessments set up for you straight away. Definitely recommend it for you and your team, and definitely recommend it for any potential candidates that you're interviewing to join your team. But you can't get everybody to do a DISC assessment when you first meet them. You can't sit down with a customer and go, hey, before we get started, can you just complete this DISC assessment and then let me have some time to read the report? No, of course not. You need to very quickly be able to just box somebody into a D, I, S, or C. Now, we're more complicated than that, but you just want a quick and dirty kind of, is this person more of a high D? Is this person more of a high I? So you can very quickly adapt your communication style accordingly. And why is this so important? Well, people have decided whether or not they like you within 7 seconds. Within 7 seconds, they've decided whether they like you or not when you first meet them. And in a sales situation, a customer has generally decided within the first 30 seconds of meeting you, they've decided whether they're going to buy from you. Before you've even started talking about the product or the price, the decision's already been made in their brain as to whether or not they like you and they're going to buy from you. So we got to know really, really quickly how we should be communicating with an individual. So here's how you do it. By the way, take notes, but if you email me directly, I'll be happy to send you this slide, all right? No problem. Also, you can watch the recording back. So when you meet somebody for the first time, first you want to ask yourself, is this person outgoing and direct, or is this person reserved or indirect? So people are outgoing and direct. They tend to talk faster. They tend to talk louder. They tell more than they ask, okay? And they've got more inflection in their voice. Inflection is up and down, that kind of thing. As if you were maybe a radio presenter. Or are they reserved or indirect? So reserved and indirect people are slower paced. They talk a little bit quieter. They might have a little bit more monotone in their voice and less inflection. So you can kind of see how I'm talking a little bit differently in reserved, as opposed to when I'm outgoing and direct. All right, so I'm not an actor. Sorry, guys, but that's the best I can do. So let's say you determine, and you can determine this very quickly, right? So within the first few seconds of talking to somebody, you can just pin them down to either outgoing or reserved. So let's say they're outgoing, then you want to identify the next thing is, are they more competitive and directing, or are they more talkative and interacting? So competitive and directing is, first of all, do they have a closed or formal posture? So a closed posture means maybe they have their arms crossed, or they're just looking a little bit more formal. They're less relaxed. This is a professional relationship. This guy isn't my pal yet. Also, people might put physical barriers between themselves and you. So they might stay behind their desk, or they might stay behind a table, or there might just be a little bit more distance between the two of you. Or maybe they're inexpressive, so they've got a cool face, which means they're not giving a lot away. You can't really tell by looking at somebody's facial expressions whether or not, or you know, what they're thinking, what they're feeling. Or are they more open and casual and comfortable, and you know, there's no physical barriers between them. They come up and they, you know, and when they shake your hand, they also pat your shoulder or something like that. And you know, they can call a warmer face. They're smiling a little bit more, and they're probably talking more about the who than the what. And if you can figure out which of these they are, then you've pretty much just boxed them into a D or an I. The I's are the people, love to laugh, love to talk, win them over, and they'll be your best friend and they'll buy from you. Whereas the D's, give it to them straight, be blunt, tell them about the results, and be quick with your words, because these don't have a lot of time, they don't have a lot of patience for detail. Let's say you identified them down here in this lower box as reserved or indirect, so slower pace, more monotone, that kind of thing. Then you want to ask yourself, is this person more assessing and thinking, or are they more accepting and doing? So same as the D's, the assessors and thinkers are closed posture, more formal, physical barriers between you, arms crossed perhaps, and that cool face again, so you can't really tell what a person is thinking. They'll ask a lot of detailed questions, especially around the why. And they'll ask you a lot of questions about potential problems. So you can tell pretty quickly whether they're a C. And the S's tend to be the hardest to identify, so I usually just use the process of elimination. If they're not a D, an I, or a C, they must be an S. But again, if the person is kind of reserved and talking at a slower or quieter pace, but they still have a warm face, so plenty of eye contact, a little bit of a smile, that kind of thing, they are probably NS. So just a quick and dirty way to identify which of the 4 boxes they're predominantly in, so that you can very quickly adjust your communication style accordingly. Now this slide here, this is an ugly slide. It's an old slide. I've been showing it for years. I've just never been able to bring myself to spend the time to tidy it up a little bit. But you know, this is a similar kind of slide for how you can very quickly identify whether a person is a D, I, S, or C, and then some summary points on how you can sell to them. So I'm not going to insult your intelligence by reading you all the things on this slide, but I'll just give you a bit of an example. If you're selling to a C, you need to give them all the detail that they need. So it says they'll ask you thousands of questions, they want all the detail, make sure you give it to them. You need to be very patient with the C, answer all of their questions, or else you're going to get the objection, let me think about it, or I'm going to shop around. And then also as another example, the I's, the people. Win them over and be their friend. Have a sense of humor. Laugh with them. Let them talk. I's love to talk, so just let them talk and talk and talk. If you keep interrupting an I, and if you talk over an I, and if you shut the I up, you know, they're not going to like you. They're not going to feel comfortable with you. But if they feel comfortable with you and they like you, they're much more likely to buy from you. So they're the easiest to sell to, unless you're like me with a very, very high C that doesn't do all of these things very naturally. So when I'm selling to an I, or coaching an I, or just, you know, dealing with an I, I've got to bring my I out. I've got to bring my sense of humor out and act like I would be acting with some of my closest friends at the pub. So if you want the slide, I can send it to you. It's a very, very, very valuable slide, this little tool here. Just is maybe not the prettiest graphic. So this is a fun little slide here before we move on to other things. This will just show you what the comfort level is between two different disc profiles when people first meet. So this purple or gray, however it's coming up on your screen, represents comfort zone. Okay, so the more purple or gray, the more comfort between two people. The less purple or gray, the less comfortable. So you can see two I's here. It's probably the most obvious one. Two I's, very comfortable with each other, love to laugh, love to chat. You ain't going to get any work done, but they'll get along like gangbusters. Same with the S's, very comfortable with each other, very trusting, very sensitive and understanding. They'll get along great. Two C's, again, they'll get bogged down into the detail together. They'll love it. They'll all talk about the risks and the challenges. They'll love to solve problems together. So C's will get along great. The D's and the C's, and it's not about getting along, it's just about comfort, comfort levels when people first interact with each other. C's and D's, not a lot of comfort there. The D's just want things to happen now. The C's want to take forever to make sure everything's right. The D's are just like, yeah, we can do this. The C's are like, yeah, but maybe you can't because of this, this, and this. So the C drives the D crazy. The D stresses the C out. Ultimately, anybody can get along with anybody else, but these are just the initial comfort levels. Two D's, there's a lot of comfort there because two D's, both dynamic, they can have a lot of respect for each other. The risk with two high D's together, working together, is that there could be kind of too many chefs in the kitchen. So we're both making decisions, and then we can, you know, maybe clash a little bit. So again, I can email you this if you like, and you can take a closer look. All right, let's talk a little bit more about how we interact with each other, how we communicate with each other. So what you first need to understand is just how many relationships there are in your business. And I think a lot of people make the mistake of, well, if I've got 10 employees, then there's 10 relationships. Well, there isn't. There's a formula for calculating how many actual relationships there are in your business. And the formula goes like this. I don't actually have it to pull up on the screen, so you need to write it down. It's the number of employees squared minus the number of employees divided by 2. The number of employees squared minus the number of employees divided by 2. So let's just use 10 for as an example, because that's easy math. So if you have 10 employees in your business, you don't just have 10 individual unique relationships. You've got to take 10 squared, which is 100, minus 10 is 90, divided by 2 is 45. So you've got 45 unique relationships in this business of 10 employees. And that's a lot of potential for things to go wrong. That's a lot of potential conflicts or quarrels or, you know, any kind of relationships. You got 45 different interactions going on there. And so it's really, really important that we're, you know, focusing on how is everybody communicating with everybody else? What kind of culture do we have in our organization? So how we communicate with other people, what it's really coming down to is the respect we have for the other person and our own self-respect. So respect we have for ourselves. And by respect, what I mean is listening and taking into account the other person's perspective, opinion, but also taking into account our own perspective and our own opinion. Okay, so we can have a low respect or a high respect for other people, and we can have a low or a high self-respect. And again, that puts us into, just like the disc, it can put us into one of 4 quadrants. So let's just start in the lower left quadrant. When you have a low respect for the other person, what that means is, I don't care what you have to say. I'm not interested in your point of view. I'm not interested in your needs, wants, and desires. I don't care, but also I'm a miserable human being myself. I'm not interested, because I'm miserable, I'm going to make everybody else miserable. And maybe in your career, you've come across people like that. And we call them in psychobabble terms, that's manipulative aggressive. These are people that basically just want to bring an organization down from the inside out. They're miserable. They want to make sure everybody else is miserable. They want to find a lose-lose situation. I'm losing, you're going to lose as well. Obviously, people like that are poisonous in an organization, and they tend to be pretty easy to identify. You can have people who have a high self-respect but a low respect for others. So these are the people that are very often egomaniacs. They are the office politicians. So office politics basically means you operate on a different agenda than everybody else. So I want what I want, even at the expense of others. I will step on other people's toes to get what I want. It's my way or the highway. You can use any of these cliches that you want. Basically, it's people getting what they want without taking into account other people's needs, wants, and desires. That's a win-lose situation. We certainly don't want that in our organization because we want a win-win, and that's what we're working towards. And then the opposite is something that people probably don't realize is a real problem in organizations, and it does exist quite prominently. And that's when you have a high respect for the other person, but a low self-respect. So what that means is, I'm going to do whatever it is that you want. I'm going to go along with you. I'm going to listen to your perspective and opinion, take into account your needs, wants, and desires. But what we're not going to do is we're not going to take into account my opinion, my needs, wants, and desires. I'll just say yes to everything you say, even if I disagree with it. Or I'll just do whatever you tell me to do, even if I really don't want to. And I'll give up, I'll make sacrifices to avoid conflict or to make sure you continue to like me. I'm worried that you won't like me if I say no. And we call that being passive. We give in, and that's a win-lose situation, lose-win situation. And we don't want that, because if people in our organization are being passive, we're probably not getting the best performance out of them, because they're not really communicating back to us. They're just saying yes all the time. So ultimately where we want to get to is the top right quadrant, where we have a high self-respect and a high respect for the other person. I'm going to listen to you. I'm going to take into account your perspective, your opinion, your needs, wants, and desires, but you're also going to hear mine. And we call this being assertive. And I think people misunderstand what assertive means. I think people confuse assertive with aggressive. And because people will say things like, oh, that person's really assertive. You always know where she stands. She's always telling it like it is. That's not really assertive. Assertive is basically just, look, there's two people in this conversation. We each have a position here. I'm going to listen to yours and respect it and give you your due, your day in court. I'm going to give you your due. And then you're going to hear mine as well. So I'm going to expect you to listen to my perspective, my position, or what I want out of this. And then we'll work towards a win-win. So assertive is where we want to get to, because we can resolve conflicts, we can solve problems, we can move forward much more quickly because we're both in this together, okay? So we can't ignore where we're coming from, we can't ignore where the other person is coming from, we need to bring it all together. So we've come up with a chart that kind of reflects this, but it's a little bit easier to remember than hostile, aggressive, and assertive, and passive. And it's basically, I'm okay, you're okay. And where we want to find ourselves is in a position of, I'm okay, you're okay. Hey, my position counts, your position counts. I'm going to say what I have to say, you're going to say what you have to say, we're going to listen to each other. We don't want to be in a position of, I'm not okay and you're okay. Or I'm okay and you're not okay, or neither of us are okay. So it's just an easier, kind of more fun way of remembering this. This is a great thing you can incorporate into your team culture statement. You can teach, I've got clients who put this up on the walls in their office, and I come in and I teach their team about I'm okay, you're okay, and they love it, and they make it a rule. So that if anybody's being I'm not okay or you're not okay, we can call them on it, and we can hold them accountable to living by these rules. So hope you find that helpful. Guys, we've got 15 minutes to go. I'm already seeing a couple questions come up in the question box here, which is actually hidden by my webcam. So let me just pull these questions up. While I'm doing that, in the meantime, these are my contact details, and I would encourage you, if you're a business owner, a business leader, if you want to do a one-off complimentary coaching session with me, it takes an hour. There's no charge. We do them on Zoom. And I'll give you a whole bunch of ideas and strategies to help you with your communication or just helping you strategize the growth of your business. You'll get a chance to feel what it's like to be coached or to be coached by me. Whether or not it goes anywhere moving forward, that's entirely up to you. But I allocate 5 hours a week doing pro bono free coaching sessions for anybody that asks, and kind of an appreciation for you coming on the webinar. So here's how you can get in touch with me. Please follow me on Twitter and I'll follow you back. Connect with me on LinkedIn and I'll connect with you back. Let's do the whole thing on Facebook. There's my email address. And I've got a ton of YouTube videos up on my YouTube channel. So you can find my YouTube channel here or via my website. And I'll put the recording of this webinar up there as well. But if you want more information about DISC, if you want to run DISC assessments for yourself and your team, email me and I'll set you up with the links. They're £20, 95 plus VAT per DISC assessment. And there's other types of DISC profiles as well. So you get DISC profiles for salespeople, DISC profiles for recruitment. You can get a DISC report that takes two other people's DISC reports together and gives you a report on how these two people should be interacting with each other. So that answers the first question that just come up. Where do you get the DISC assessments? Email me and I'll set you up. It's done online and you get the reports done instantly. So no other questions coming up. I must have just really communicated effectively, because the true measure of communication is the response you get. So it just leaves me to say thanks very much, guys, for jumping on the webinar. Hope this has been of value. Please feel free to get in touch and watch my other videos on my YouTube channel. Just search for Andrew Goldberg Action Coach on YouTube and you'll find them there. Have a fantastic day and I'll see you when we come out of lockdown. Bye-bye.